After all the lawyers spoke, the person who got the last word in court today about accused child rapist Jeffrey Epstein was a witness who says that Jeffrey Epstein is a scary person. Here is what she told the judge. My name is Courtney Wild. I was sexually abused by Jeffrey Epstein starting at the age of 14. And I would just like to ask the court to not grant him bond, to keep him in detention, just for the safety of any other girls out there that are going through what I'm going through. It is a public case, and it's just, he's a scary person to have walking the streets. The judge asked, where did that occur, the sexual inappropriates? She replied, in Palm Beach, Florida. The judge said he would rule on Jeffrey Epstein's request for bail on Thursday. And today in court, prosecutors revealed that investigators found a locked safe in Jeffrey Epstein's New York City home that contained what they called piles of cash and an expired false passport with Jeffrey Epstein's picture in it and a fake name in it. The passport listed his residence as Saudi Arabia. Joining us now is Vicki Ward, an investigative reporter who profiled Jeffrey Epstein for Vanity Fair in 2011 and was in that court hearing today. Also, Barbara McQuade is with us. She's a former U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan. She is also an MSNBC legal contributor. And Vicki, when I read the transcript, it seemed to me that that ending of hearing from two of Jeffrey Epstein's alleged victims was, for me in the reading of it, the most moving part of the day.
Well, I think, so the judge actually set it up in the beginning. And there was a ripple that went through the courtroom when he said, there are victims with us today. And you could see David Boies and Bradley Edwards, two attorneys, sitting at the back. And I think everyone was
representing those.
Yes, and everyone was waiting to see if they would speak. And you know, one of them, in fact, the first one, Annie Farmer, was one of the women who spoke to me back in 2002, Lawrence, for Vanity Fair. And this was the first moment that she got to sort of stand up in public and I think feel that she would be believed. And it was an extraordinary moment. They moved to the front. Jeffrey Epstein never looked at either one of them. He kept his eyes dead focused on the judge. And both of them gave short statements, slightly trembling, but it was a really, I think, extraordinary moment. And it's a sort of landmark in this story of how the culture has turned.
In a courtroom like this, when the defendant is sitting there, he's usually has his back to you for the entire proceedings. It's hard to read a reaction of the defendant from where the press is normally sitting. But what could you get from Jeffrey Epstein, especially when the girls were, they're now women, they were girls, yeah, when they were on the witness stand?
Well, so Bradley Edwards, Courtney Wild's lawyer, told me afterwards, so he went up with Courtney Wild as she spoke, so he could see Jeffrey Epstein. And so he told me that Jeffrey Epstein's face did not move, that he stayed fixed on the judge. I mean, I could see him, as you say, from behind, bolt upright, shaven, in the blue prison uniform. You know, as far he was putting on the show of his life, and he put it on, I have to say, today, because this is a very big decision that's going to come down on Thursday. And
Barbara McQuade, this judge seems disinclined to give people in these situations a bail. But when he hears today that we found one fake passport in one of his homes, and the judge knows that he has a home in the Virgin Islands, he has another home in Paris, another home in Florida. The judge could be wondering, how many fake passports does he have in safes in the other houses that someone in the Epstein operation could get to him?
Yeah, this seems like a strong case for detention. Ordinarily, there is a presumption in favor of release unless a judge finds that there are no conditions that can, number one, assure that the person will come back for trial, or two, assure the safety of the community. In this case, there's a rare list of just a few statutes that has the presumption going the other way, and that is that the judge is to presume detention when a defendant is charged with certain very serious crimes, and it includes sex trafficking of minors. So he's already behind the 8 ball there. And then when you have some of the facts that came out today, like a passport in someone else's name saying that your residence is in Saudi Arabia, and some very compelling testimony from victims, as well as payments that look a little shady. We don't know exactly what those are for, but to suggest potential witness tampering, I think all of those things, along with that presumption of detention, makes it a very strong case for detention. I would strongly expect that on Thursday we find out that there is a carefully drafted order to withstand appeal that detains Jeffrey Epstein pretrial.
And Barbara, what does it mean to have those two women stand up and say, when we were young girls, he sexually abused me? And let me just get this clear for the audience. Any form of sex with girls under the legal age is, in the eyes of the law, rape. It fits the word rape, no matter what that sexual contact is. But what does it mean for the judge to hear from those two?
Well, I can imagine that it was very compelling. It's very rare to hear from victims at a detention hearing. Ordinarily, the prosecution proceeds, as they did in this case, with what's known as a proffer, and they sort of recite to the judge a number of undisputed facts and proffer evidence. To have live witnesses, including victims, is very rare, but I have to imagine it was very compelling. And remember, the question today is not guilt or innocence of these charges. It is whether this person is either a risk of flight or a potential danger to the community. And so alleging sex with underage girls in a serial fashion means, putting him out there poses a potential danger to other girls who are out there. And so I think that was the point the prosecutors were trying to make, and it sounds like they made it in a compelling way.
And Vicki, the judge has seen that some alleged victims have come forward since the arrest, and
right.
that leaves open the possibility that more could come forward by the end of this week.
I'm being contacted every day.
You are? Yeah.
Yes, literally within the last hour, I had yet one more email. I know that Bradley Edwards and David Boies are getting similar phone calls. And so I think that was the point that actually Annie Farmer made, that victims might feel not so confident in coming forward if he gets bail. I will say one thing, Lawrence, about that passport. Jeffrey Epstein has testified in the late 1980s that he was finding money for people. I can tell you that, according to one of my sources, one of those people was Adnan Khashoggi. He's now dead, big Saudi. Yes, so that might explain.
He's a big Saudi businessman. At the time, we thought the
Yes.
richest of the Saudi businessmen.
Yes.
Yeah. So Khashoggi would have been in a position to help him get a Saudi.
No, yes, he would have been. And if Jeffrey Epstein was finding money that was stolen from him, that would explain it.
We're going to have to leave it there for tonight. Vicki Ward, Barbara McQuaid, thank you both for joining us. Really appreciate it. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.